The Founder of Demonic Cultivation. An English translation by ㅤㅤㅤㅤ. Read by Luna Minerva. Chapter 38. Flora, Part 7. Ah Ching seemed momentarily dazed. "Yes, oh, yes," she said finally. "Then you ought to slow down a little and not walk so fast. It would be unfortunate if you collided with someone again," Xiaoxingchen said. Without mentioning that he couldn't see either, he took Ah Ching's hand and directed her to the side of the road. "You should walk here. There are fewer people." Both his words and actions were gentle and careful. Ah Ching reached out her hand hesitantly, but in the end, she still snatched the money pouch attached to his waist with remarkable agility, in a maneuver that would leave even gods and spirits none the wiser. "Ah Ching thanks you, brother." "Not brother, Daozhang," Xiaoxingchen said. Ah Ching blinked. "But even if you're Daozhang, you're still brother." He smiled. "Since you insist on calling me brother, how about returning your brother's wallet?" Even if she was 10 times as swift, a street urchin like Ah Ching still couldn't fool a cultivator's senses. As soon as she heard she was in trouble, she raised her bamboo pole and broke into a mad run. She barely made it 2 steps before Xiaoxingchen's hand found her collar and hauled her back. "I said you shouldn't run so fast. What if you crashed into someone again?" Ah Ching twisted and struggled. Her mouth twitched and her upper teeth bit into her lower lip. Oh no, Wei Wuxian thought. She's gonna shout, "Molester!" Just then, the middle-aged man dashed around the street corner. Immediately upon seeing Ah Ching, his eyes lit up. "You little bitch! I finally caught you! Give me my money back!" He stalked toward her, swearing. But cursing her was not enough to quench his anger, so he raised his hand, palm open, and swung at her face. Frightened, Ah Ching hastily shrunk, lowering her head and closing her eyes. However, the slap did not land on her cheek, but was stopped mid-flight. "Sir, please calm down. It's not quite right to treat a young girl this way, don't you think?" Ah Ching opened her eyes and stole a glance. The middle-aged man was clearly exerting a lot of strength, yet Xiaoxingchen held back his hand lightly, preventing it from proceeding a centimeter further. Nervous, the man nonetheless spoke with a stubborn, hardened tongue. "You blind, meddling ass! What do you think you're doing trying to play the hero? Is this feral little bitch your lover? Don't you know she's a thief? She stole my wallet. If you protect her, you're a thief too!" Xiaoxingchen held him back with one hand and clutched Ah Ching with the other. He turned his head and said, "Return his money to him." Hurriedly, Ah Ching reached into her clothes, pulled out the meager coins, and handed them over. Xiaoxingchen released the middle-aged man, who lowered his head and began counting. Upon discovering that nothing was missing, he shot a look at the blind man. But knowing that he didn't stand a chance against him, he could only depart, embarrassed. "You're too audacious. You're blind, yet you still have the nerve to steal?" Xiaoxingchen asked. Ah Ching leapt into the air. "He groped me! He pinched my butt, and it really hurt. What's wrong with taking some money from him? There's so little in his wallet, even though the thing's so big, and he's not ashamed of flying in a rage and attacking someone? That broke bastard!" "You clearly ran into him first, intending to rob him, yet now he's the one who wronged you first. What a maneuver," Wei Wuxian thought. Xiaoxingchen shook his head. "If so, you had even more reason to avoid angering him. If no one was around today, your problems would not have ended with a single slap. Miss, you really ought to behave yourself better." When he was done, he turned in another direction and began walking away. He didn't ask for his own wallet back, Wei Wuxian thought. My cultivation uncle is also a man who cherishes and protects members of the fairer sex. Clutching the wallet she had stolen, Ah-Ching stood still for a few moments, dazed. Suddenly, she stuffed it into her robes and chased after him, knocking her bamboo pole around as she ran. She collided with him head first, forcing Xiao Xingchen to steady her. Is something else the matter? I still have your money pouch, Ah-Ching said. I am giving it to you. There is little in it anyway. Do not steal from anyone before you have finished spending it. When that stupid jerk was shouting at me, I heard him say you're blind too, Ah-Ching asked. When he heard the second part of this, Xiao Xingchen's expression immediately grew heavy, and his smile, too, rapidly faded. The innocent, brash words of a child were the deadliest of all. Children didn't understand anything, and it was precisely due to this ignorance that the pain they caused aimed truest. Beneath Xiao Xingchen's bandages, a thin trail of blood grew redder and redder, until it was nearly visible through the cloth. His arm trembled slightly as he raised his hand and covered it. The pain and injury of gouging out one's eyes did not heal so easily. But Ah-Ching thought he was merely feeling dizzy. How about I come with you then? She said happily. Xiao Xingchen forced a smile. Come with me to do what? Do you want to be a Taoist cultivator? You're a big blind one, and I'm a little blind one. If we travel together, we can take care of each other. I don't have a mom or dad, or anywhere to go. Won't I be on the road no matter who I go with, or which direction I head? Ah-Ching was extremely smart. Afraid that Xiao Xingchen wouldn't agree to the proposal, but recognizing that he was a good person, she added a threat. I spend money really fast. If you don't let me come with you, then it'll be gone soon, which means I'll have to start stealing and cheating people again. What if someone hits me so hard that I can't even tell north from south? It would be so sad. Xiao Xingchen smiled. As clever an imp as you are, you would be able to spin lies around them until they could no longer tell north from south. On the other hand, who would be able to land such a hard hit on you? Now that he had observed Ah-Ching's memories for a while, Wei Wuxian discovered something astonishing. As he now had the Honorable Xiao Xingchen himself for comparison, he realized that Xue Yang's impersonation was truly impeccable. Other than his appearance, every detail was true to reality. If someone had told him that Xue Yang had stolen Xiao Xingchen's body, he would have believed it. Ah-Ching clung to Xiao Xingchen helplessly all along the road, pretending to be blind and pitiful. He warned her many times that it was dangerous to follow him, but she refused to listen. Even when they passed a village and Xiao Xingchen exorcised an old ox that had turned into a fey spirit, she wasn't frightened off. She still constantly called him Dao Jiang, and stuck to him like treacle, never straying more than a couple of meters from his side. After she had followed him for a while, perhaps seeing that she was smart, winsome, and brave, and also wasn't a hindrance, he tacitly accepted her presence. Plus, he didn't like to see a young girl struggling on her own with no one to rely on. Originally, Wei Wuxian thought that Xiao Xingchen probably had some kind of destination, but after passing through several memories, he realized that, based on the surrounding environment and the accents and customs of the locals, the places the pair had traveled did not form any kind of coherent route, but proceeded without rhyme or reason. Xiao Xingchen didn't seem to be rushing anywhere. Instead, he night hunted as the opportunity arose, going wherever they heard there was a haunting or other strange goings-on, and handling the issue. Maybe the case of the Yueyang Chang clan was too much of a blow for him, Wei Wuxian thought. Maybe from that point on, he never wanted to have anything to do with any cultivation clan again. But he still couldn't let go of his heart's ambition. Thus, he chose to wander, going on night hunt after night hunt, solving problems as he found them. Right then, Xiao Xingchen and Ah-Ching were walking along a long, flat road. on either side of which waist-high weeds grew. Suddenly, Qing cried. "Ah!" "What's wrong?" Xiao Xingchen asked immediately. It's nothing. I twisted my ankle." Wei Wuxian could see very clearly that she hadn't shouted because of a sprained ankle. Her gait was perfectly fine. If she wasn't pretending to be blind in front of Xiao Xingchen to prevent him from shooing her away, she could have leapt high into the sky. The reason Qing had let out a surprised cry was because, as she was looking around, she had seen a black, human-shaped figure lying in the overgrown weeds. Though she didn't know whether this person was dead or alive, she had probably thought that they'd be a hassle either way. Qing clearly didn't want Xiao Xingchen to discover this person. "Let's go. We can rest in some town up ahead. I'm dead tired," she pressed. "But isn't your ankle sprained? Do you want me to carry you?" Xiao Xingchen asked. Overjoyed, she knocked her bamboo pole against the ground a few times in excitement. "Yes, yes, yes!" Xiao Xingchen smiled and turned his back toward her, kneeling on one knee. But right as Qing was about to scramble on, he suddenly grabbed hold of her and stood up. "The smell of blood is in the air," he said with great concentration. The faint stench also wound its way into Qing's nose, intermittently wafted in by the night wind. She feigned confusion. "Really? Then how come I can't smell it? Someone must have slaughtered a pig or chicken nearby, right?" However, it seemed as though heaven itself had decided that she was its enemy. As soon as she finished speaking, the person lying in the grass coughed. Though the sound was extremely quiet and feeble, it couldn't escape Xiao Xingchen's senses. He immediately discerned its origin and stepped into the weeds, squatting beside the prone figure. Realizing that Xiao Xingchen had discovered the person anyway, Qing stamped her feet and pretended to stumble along toward him. "What happened?" "Someone is lying here," he said, checking the figure's pulse. "No wonder the smell of blood is so strong. Is he dead? Should we dig a hole and bury him?" Of course, a dead person was slightly less of an inconvenience than a living one, so Qing wished that he was dead, impatient to move on. But Xiao Xingchen replied, "He's still alive. He's only severely wounded." After pondering his next course of action, he gently lifted the man onto his back. Seeing what had originally been her place now occupied by a smelly, blood-soaked man, Qing pouted and viciously stabbed the ground with her bamboo pole, producing several deep holes. They had already agreed that he would carry her to town, so much for that. However, she knew that Xiao Xingchen could not but rescue the man, so complaining would do her no good. The two returned to the road and continued along. The further they walked, the more familiar Wei Wuxian found the surroundings. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. "Isn't this the road Lanzhan and I took to East City?" Sure enough, East City emerged at the end of the road, towering overhead. At this point in time, the city gates had yet to fall to their current state of disrepair. The corner watchtowers were still intact, and the walls were still free of graffiti. When they entered, the fog thickened, but compared to the mystical fog that heavily blanketed the city at present, it was negligible. Lights were visible through the windows of the houses on either side of the street, and they could even hear the sound of human speech. Although the place was relatively deserted, there was still a bit of human spirit in the air. Xiao Xingchen was still carrying the critically wounded, blood-soaked man, and had to have realized that no inn would welcome guests such as them. Thus, he did not inquire after a room, but instead directly asked the approaching night watchman if there was an unused coffin home. "There's one over there," the watchman told him. "The old man who used to guard it just passed away last month, so no one's looking after it now." Seeing that Xiao Xingchen was blind and could not easily find his way around, the watchman took the initiative to bring them there. It was precisely the same coffin home as the one which now housed Xiao Xingchen's corpse. After thanking the guard, Xiao Xingchen carried the injured man to the lodgings on the right. The room was neither big nor small. A low bed had been placed by the wall, and pots, pans, bowls, spoons, and the like were all present. Delicately, he placed the injured man flat on the bed, produced a pellet of medicine from his qianquan pouch, and pushed it carefully into his mouth through his tightly locked jaws. Qing felt her way around the room for a while, then exclaimed excitedly, "There's so much stuff here! Here's a basin!" "Is there a stove?" Xiao Xingchen asked. "Yes!" "Qing, how about you find a way to heat some water? Be careful, don't burn yourself." Qing pressed her lips into a thin line, then started to work. After feeling the injured man's forehead, Xiao Xingchen took out another pellet and fed it to him. Wei Wuxian very much wanted to take a closer look at the man's face, but Qing clearly had no interest in him. She was quite agitated and wouldn't spare him a single glance. After she finished boiling the water, Xiao Xingchen slowly wiped the blood off the man's face. She stood to the side and looked at him curiously, and silently mouthed a "Huh?" This "huh" was due to the fact that, once his face had been cleaned, the man turned out to be quite good-looking. When Wei Wuxian laid eyes on him, however, his heart sank. Sure enough, it was Xue Yang. Evidently, Xiao Xingchen and Xue Yang were enemies traveling on a narrow road, fated for collision, he thought. Oh, Xiao Xingchen, you really are amazingly unlucky. At the time, Xue Yang was clearly still a boy, 7 parts charm and 3 parts impudent child. Who could have guessed that this youth, whose canines poked out when he smiled, was actually a cruel maniac who had massacred an entire clan? Based on Wei Wuxian's calculations, the events he was witnessing should have happened after Qin Guangyao had already ascended to the position of chief cultivator. Xue Yang's current dire state had to be due to the fact that he had just narrowly escaped Qin Guangyao's cleanup. Qin Guangyao naturally wouldn't have wanted to publicize the embarrassing fact that he had failed to kill Xue Yang, or he had believed that Xue Yang wouldn't survive anyway, so he had told everyone that he had already disposed of the boy. It was the misfortune of the millennium that, just as Xue Yang was on the brink of death, he was rescued by his old foe, Xiao Xingchen. It did not at all occur to poor Xiao Xingchen to carefully feel his face, and thus he made the ill-fated decision to save the enemy who visited such disaster upon him. Though Qing could see, she was far removed from the world of cultivation, and did not recognize Xue Yang. Even less did she know of the ocean-deep hatred between them. Indeed, she didn't even know Xiao Xingchen's name. Wei Wuxian internally sighed again. Xiao Xingchen couldn't have suffered a worse fortune. It was as though all of the toxic luck beneath the heavens had converged onto him alone. At this time, Xue Yang frowned. Xiao Xingchen was in the middle of examining and binding his wounds, and sensed that his patient seemed on the verge of waking. "Don't move," he said. Naturally, someone who had committed as many foul deeds as Xue Yang was unusually vigilant. As soon as he heard the sound, his eyes flew open, and he immediately sat up and tumbled toward the corner of the room. He stared warily at Xiao Xingchen, his eyes glinting with sinister light. His expression resembled that of a vicious, cornered beast. It hid not a shred of his cruelty or malice. Seeing it, Qing felt such intense shivers run up her spine that her scalp went numb. Wei Wuxian experienced the same sensation. Mentally, he shouted, "Say something! There's no way Xiao Xingchen won't remember the sound of Shui Yang's voice. You, Shui Yang said. With this single syllable, Wei Wuxian knew it was over. Even if Shui Yang spoke, Xiao Xingchen wouldn't be able to figure it out. At present, Shui Yang's throat was also injured. After he had coughed up so much blood, his voice was hoarse, and it was impossible to tell it belonged to the same person. Xiao Xingchen sat beside the bed. Please, I asked you not to move. Your wounds will reopen. Don't worry, I'm here to save you. Of course I won't hurt you. Shui Yang very rapidly adapted to the situation. Immediately he realized Xiao Xingchen almost certainly hadn't recognized him. He glanced around and coughed a few times. Who are you? You have eyes, can't you see for yourself? Qing interjected. He's a wandering Taoist cultivator. He went through so much trouble to carry you back and heal you. He even gave you a miracle drug. But you're still this hostile? Shui Yang's gaze immediately swiveled to her. Are you blind? He asked coldly. Internally, Wei Wuxian shouted in alarm. This little hooligan Shui Yang was crafty, sharp, and extraordinarily keen. Even if Qing's pupils were naturally white, as a matter of course, he still wouldn't lower his guard or let a single point of suspicion slip by. With one mistake, he had already caught on. He had only spoken a few words just then. Qing would have had great difficulty determining he was hostile purely on the basis of the tone in which they had been spoken, unless she could also see the expression on his face. Fortunately, Qing had grown up lying. Oh, so you look down on blind people, she said immediately. Well, a blind person rescued you. Otherwise, no one would have cared if you had started rotting by the roadside. The first thing out of your mouth when you woke up wasn't even a thank you. How rude! You even insulted me for being blind. So what if I'm blind? Having successfully changed the topic, she put on an indignant, aggrieved expression, muttering discontentedly. Xiao Xingchen hastily tried to comfort her, while Shui Yang sat in the corner, rolling his eyes. Don't lean against the wall, Xiao Xingchen said, turning toward him. I haven't finished bandaging the wound on your leg. Why don't you come closer? Shui Yang appeared aloof and continued to mull over the situation. If we put off healing your leg any longer, you might lose it, Xiao Xingchen added. Once he heard this, Shui Yang made a firm decision. Wei Wuxian could guess what was going through his head. At present, he was severely injured and had difficulty moving. The outcome, if no one cared for his injuries, was unacceptable. Since Xiao Xingchen had foolishly acted with more generosity than sense and offered him help, why not accept it? Thus, his expression suddenly shifted, and his voice filled with gratitude. Then, thank you for your trouble, Dao Zhang. Witnessing Shui Yang's ability to change faces, to wear a ruthless expression one minute and a smiling one the next, Wei Wuxian couldn't help but break out in sweat on behalf of the blind pair, both the real and the fake one. Indeed, especially for the falsely blind Qing. She could see everything. Thus, if Shui Yang found out the truth, he would undoubtedly kill her so his secrets wouldn't leak. Even though Wei Wuxian knew perfectly well that, in the end, Qing probably had been murdered by Shui Yang, seeing the course of events firsthand, he still couldn't help but feel his heart pound and stomach lurch. Suddenly, he noticed that Shui Yang had been careful to avoid letting Xiao Xingchen come in contact with his left hand. Examining it more carefully, Wei Wuxian discovered that the hand was missing a pinky finger. The wound had long healed. Xiao Xingchen must have known at the time that Shui Yang only had 9 fingers. No wonder Shui Yang had worn a black glove over his left hand during his impersonation. Xiao Xingchen always put his wholehearted effort into helping and healing people. He lowered his head and finished applying medicine to Xue Yang's wounds, bandaging them beautifully. "It's good now, but it's best if you don't move. Otherwise you will dislocate your bones again." Xue Yang was already firmly convinced that Xiao Xingchen had stupidly failed to recognize him. Though his entire body was a complete blood-soaked mess, a lazy, smug smile appeared on his face. "Daojiang, aren't you going to ask who I am? Why I'm so heavily injured?" Anyone else in his place would have carefully avoided this topic to prevent exposing a single trail of hoof prints or strand of a spider web that could lead to their identity. But Xue Yang insisted on turning common sense on its head and intentionally raised the issue. Head lowered, Xiao Xingchen gathered up the medicine and bandages. "Since you haven't told me, why must I ask?" Xiao Xingchen said warmly. "We have met like fallen leaves brought together by the water's flow. I am only lending a hand. It gives me no trouble. We can wait until you're healed and then part ways. If I were in your place, there are many things I would not want others to ask about me." Even if Xiao Xingchen had started to question him, this hooligan would have sewn together some seamless story. Wrapping him in so many layers of deception, it would make his head spin. Nearly everyone's past has messy parts. Xiao Xingchen declined to interrogate Xue Yang out of respect. How could he have known Xue Yang would just happen to take advantage of it? Wei Wuxian would have bet his life that the hooligan wasn't going to stop at tricking Xiao Xingchen into helping him recover. Once he had healed, he certainly would not obediently part ways. Xue Yang rested in the guard's room, while Xiao Xingchen went into the main chamber and opened one of the coffins. He picked up a good deal of the straw from the ground and spread it in a thick layer over the bottom of the coffin. "The man in the other room is injured, so we'll let him use the bed," he said to Qing. "I must burden you and ask you to sleep here. I covered the bottom with straw, so it should not be cold." Qing had been homeless since she was small and had endured many nights of sleeping outdoors, her stomach filled with nothing but wind. Where hadn't she slept? "What kind of burden is that?" she said indifferently. "As long as I have a place to sleep, that's already pretty good. I'm not cold. Don't take off your outer robes to give to me." Xiao Xingchen patted her head. He then stuck the horsetail whisk by his waist, pulled his sword over his back, and walked out the door. For the sake of her safety, when Xiao Xingchen night hunted, he never permitted her to follow him. Qing got into the coffin and lay down for a while, until she suddenly heard Xue Yang calling her from the other room. "Little blind one, come over here." Qing stuck her head out. "What?" "I want to give you some candy," he said. For a moment, she could nearly taste the tart flavor on her tongue. But though she seemed to have every desire to take him up on his offer, she refused. "I don't want any. I'm not coming." "You really don't want to try any?" Xue Yang said, voice laced with saccharine threat. "Are you refusing to come because you're scared? But do you really believe that if you don't come, I won't be able to move and come find you?" Hearing his peculiar tone, Qing shivered. She imagined his malicious smile suddenly appearing over the coffin and grew even more terrified. After a moment's hesitation, she finally picked up her bamboo pole and tap-tapped her way slowly toward the door to his room. Before she even opened her mouth, something small flew abruptly toward her. Subconsciously, Wei Wuxian wanted to dodge in case it was some kind of concealed weapon. But of course, he had no control over Qing's body. Soon after, he came to a sudden and startling realization. It's a trap. Xue Yang was experimenting on Qing. If she was truly blind, she shouldn't be able to dodge. Qing proved herself a veteran of posing as a blind girl at all times. She was quick. When she saw the object sailing toward her, she didn't attempt to duck out the way. She didn't even blink. Instead, she allowed it to strike her lower chest, and only then did she jump back. "Hey! What did you throw at me?" she shouted. "Candy for you to eat," Shui-Young said, his first experiment a failure. "I forgot that you're blind and can't catch it. It landed by your foot." Ah-Ching let out a and knelt down. She groped around in search of the piece of candy for a little while, putting on an impeccable show, until finally she found it. She had never tasted such things before. Swallowing a few times, she picked it up and brushed it off a few times before placing it in her mouth and crunching on it happily. Shui-Young lay on his side atop the bed, supporting his cheek on one hand. "Does it taste good, little blind one?" "I have a name," Ah-Ching said. "I'm not called Little Blind One." "But you haven't told me your name, so I have to call you that." Up to this point, Ah-Ching had only given her name to people who treated her well, but she didn't like the ugly way Shui-Young referred to her. "You listen up. I'm called Ah-Ching," she had no choice but to say. "You're not allowed to call me Little Blind One anymore." As soon as she finished, she worried that her tone had been too strong. Afraid that she might have made him angry, she immediately changed the subject. "You're so strange. You're covered in blood and horribly injured, but you carry candy around." Shui-Young laughed. "When I was small, I loved candy, but I could never get my hands on any. I could only salivate as I watched other people eat it. So I always thought, if I made it one day, I'd carry so much candy on me that I could never run out." Right then, Ah-Ching just happened to finish the piece in her mouth. She licked her lips, not fully satisfied. "So, do you have more?" she asked, her desire for candy overcoming her hatred of the person before her. Shui-Young smiled. "Of course I do. Come over here, and I'll give some to you." Ah-Ching stood up, and tapping the ground with her bamboo pole, she walked toward him. When she made it halfway, a strange glimmer appeared in Shui-Young's eyes. The smile on his face unchanging, he silently reached into his sleeve and pulled out a sword, which gleamed with dark, cold light. "Jiang Zai." He pointed the tip of the blade at Ah-Ching. If she walked a few more steps forward, she would be impaled. But if she hesitated even a moment, the fact that she wasn't truly blind would be revealed. Wei Wuxian shared all 5 of Ah-Ching's senses, and he could also feel the prickling at the back of her head. However, the girl had incomparable courage and composure, and continued to feel her way forward, expression normal. Sure enough, when her stomach was about a centimeter from the tip of the blade, Shui-Young drew back Jiang Zai on his own and placed it back into his sleeve, exchanging it for a couple of pieces of candy. He gave one to Ah-Ching and threw the other into his mouth. "Ah-Ching, Ah-Ching, Ah-Ching, where does your Daojiang go in the middle of the night?" he asked. Ah-Ching crunched on her candy. "I think he's hunting." "Hunting? Don't you mean night hunting?" Shui-Young said, giggling. "Is that it? Those words are basically the same. What's the difference? He's just helping people fight off ghosts and monsters. He doesn't even ask for money." She was astonishingly shrewd, Wei Wuxian thought. Ah-Ching hadn't forgotten at all. Everything Xiao Xingchen said, she remembered more clearly than anyone. She had said the wrong thing on purpose, and since Shui-Young corrected her, he had effectively confirmed that he was also a cultivator. His test had failed, but she had tested him successfully in return. Though the girl was so young, her mind was surprisingly sharp. Shui-Young's expression was full of disdain, and he sounded doubtful. "He can night hunt even though he's blind?" There you go again, Ah-Ching said angrily. So what if he's blind? He's still amazing. His sword swooshes through the air. Woo! In a word, fast. Her hands danced in gesticulation. But you can't see. How do you know his sword is fast? Shui-Yang said suddenly. The attack was quick, but the counterattack was quicker. Ah-Ching immediately gave an obnoxious-sounding retort. If I say it's fast, then it's fast. Dao Jiang's sword has to be fast. Even if I can't see, I can still hear it. What exactly are you trying to say? Are you looking down on blind people like us? She sounded exactly like a childish, thoughtless girl heaping adulation upon someone she admired. Her acting couldn't have been more natural. At this point, Shui-Yang had tested her 3 times without a result. Finally, most likely convinced that Ah-Ching was truly blind, he relaxed his expression. On the other hand, Ah-Ching now found Shui-Yang extremely alarming. The next day, as soon as Xiao Xingchen returned from his trip outside in search of wood, straw, and tiles to fix the roof, she quietly pulled him out the door and whispered to him for a long time. She told him that this person's demeanor was suspicious, that he was clearly a cultivator like Xiao Xingchen but was keeping secrets, that he obviously wasn't a good person. But to no avail. She probably thought that the missing pinky finger was unimportant, and thus didn't bring up Shui-Yang's most damning characteristic. Xiao Xingchen placated her a while. You even ate his candy, so do not try to drive him away again. Once he is healed, he will leave on his own. No one would want to stay in this coffin home with us. Indeed, this was true. The rotten place only had 1 bed, and they were lucky the winds hadn't picked up and the rain hadn't started to fall yet. Otherwise, they would have found themselves drowning in all the problems the roof posed. No one would have wanted to stay there. Ah-Ching had yet to finish bad-mouthing Shui-Yang, when suddenly, his voice came from behind her. Are you two talking about me? In spite of everything, he had gotten out of bed again. But Ah-Ching didn't feel the least bit guilty for her behavior. Who's talking about you, narcissist? She picked up her bamboo pole and tapped her way back inside, then furtively hid beneath the window and continued eavesdropping. Outside the coffin home, Xiao Xingchen said, Your injury hasn't healed, yet you continue to refuse to listen and walk around. Are you sure you will be all right? You heal faster if you walk more, Shui-Yang said. Plus, it's not as though both my legs are broken. I'm used to being injured like this. I was raised by beatings. Xiao Xingchen seemed to be at a loss for how to respond, whether to comfort him or take it as a joke. He paused for a moment. Oh, Dao Jiang, Shui-Yang continued. I see you've brought some things back with you. Are they for fixing the roof? I should be staying here and resting for a while. It won't do for the roof to remain so dilapidated. It won't be good for Ah-Ching or for your recovery. Do you want me to help? Shui-Yang asked. Xiao Xingchen thanked him. Don't trouble yourself, there's no need. You know how to fix roofs? Xiao Xingchen wore an embarrassed smile and shook his head. Actually, I've never attempted it. Thus, the two worked together to fix the roof, one laboring, the other giving direction. Shui-Yang was quite the conversationalist. He was very good at cracking jokes and spoke with a kind of urban marketplace impudence. Xiao Xingchen hadn't had much prior experience with people like him, and he was easily amused. Just a few of Shui-Yang's remarks could make him laugh. Listening to their pleasant conversation, Ah-Ching viciously but silently mouthed a few words. After careful observation, it seemed as though she were saying, I'm gonna kill you, you horrible thing. Wei Wuxian and Ah-Ching's feelings were the same. Shui-Yang was seriously injured and had nearly lost his life, and he and Xiao Xingchen had an old debt to settle. They were the kind of enemies that couldn't live under the same sky. At present, Xueyang wanted nothing more than for Xiao Xingchen to die and leave a bloody and mutilated corpse. Yet outwardly, he was still able to joke around with him. If Wei Wuxian himself had been crouching beneath the window, he would have murdered Xueyang first and worried about the consequences later. But no matter. This wasn't his body, and though Qing had all the desire to kill him, she didn't have the ability. After around a month under Xiao Xingchen's meticulous care, Xueyang's injuries were nearly fully healed. Other than a slight limp when he walked, they no longer posed any obstacle. However, he did not say a word about departing and continued living with the other two inside the cramped coffin house. Who knew what he was scheming? By this time, Xiao Xingchen had already put Qing to bed and was about to leave and night hunt again when Xueyang's voice suddenly rang out. "Daozhang, how about you bring me along tonight?" Xueyang's throat ought to have healed long ago too, but he intentionally avoided using his own voice, faking a different timbre instead. Xiao Xingchen smiled. "Oh, that won't do. As soon as you open your mouth, I start laughing, and if I start laughing, my sword will be unsteady." "Then I won't say anything," Xueyang said pitifully. "I'll carry your sword for you and be your assistant. Don't shun me." He was well accustomed to behaving like a brat. To older people, he spoke just like a baby brother. Plus, when Xiao Xingchen had been a disciple of Bao Shan's son Ren, he had apparently taken care of young disciples, and so he reflexively saw Xueyang as his junior. On top of all that, Xiao Xingchen knew that Xueyang was a cultivator too, so he cheerfully agreed to the boy's request to accompany him. There's no way Xueyang has good intentions, Wei Wuxian thought. He even wants to help Xiao Xingchen night hunt. If Qing doesn't follow them, then we'll miss something big. However, Qing was indeed quick-witted and understood that Xueyang was probably up to no good. She waited until the pair left, then hopped out of the coffin and followed them at a distance. But because she was afraid of being noticed, she stayed too far away. Xiao Xingchen and Xueyang were fast, and before long, she had lost them. Fortunately, while he was washing vegetables some time earlier, Xiao Xingchen had mentioned that walking corpses were harassing a small village nearby, and that she and Xueyang shouldn't run amok when they went outside. Qing remembered the village's location and ran straight in its direction. Not long after, she arrived and squeezed past the fence at the entrance through the dog tunnel which ran beneath it. She hid behind a nearby house and furtively poked out her head. Wei Wuxian didn't know if Qing understood what she saw when she did this, but his heart suddenly went cold. Xueyang stood by the road, his arms crossed over his chest. His head was cocked, and he was smiling. Xiao Xingchen stood across from him, calmly wielding his sword. Xuanhua's silver light flew past, and the blade plunged into a villager's heart. That villager was alive.